This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Viewers are advised to speak with their own healthcare providers before making changes in diet or exercise regimens.
People are going to be living longer in our culture, and it's worth thinking about how you want to do that. Food that is healthy and food that gives pleasure are not mutually exclusive. There has been, I think, tremendous misinformation in our culture about fat and health. I'm going to teach you about how to put together an optimum diet that will maximally protect your health and longevity.
From the New York Botanical Gardens, it's Eating Well for Optimum Health with Dr. Andrew Weil. A graduate of Harvard Medical School and a leader in the field of integrative medicine, Dr. Weil explores how to make eating healthy and pleasurable and dispels the myths of today's fad diets. Now, here's Dr. Weil.
Hi, I'm Dr. Andrew Weil. I believe I know some of the secrets of good health and longevity, and I'm going to do my best to share some of them with you in this program as I teach you how to integrate some conventional and some alternative medical ideas that may change the way that you look at health and disease. I'm particularly going to talk about diet and health, food and nutrition, so that you won't be as confused about all the popular diets that are out there, telling you so many different ways of eating that are in conflict with each other. I hope you'll leave this program not eating as much junk food, but I also hope that you will be getting at least as much enjoyment as you now do from food, and I'm going to teach you about how to put together an optimum diet that will maximally protect your health and longevity. First, let me tell you a little bit about my background. I'm trained as a botanist as well as a medical doctor. I did my undergraduate work in botany at Harvard. That was my first love, and I think it's very appropriate that we're here in this beautiful conservatory of the New York Botanical Garden in the Bronx. A lot of what I'm going to tell you tonight was based on my studies of plants and human beings' relationships with plants in many different cultures. I then went to Harvard Medical School, but I have never practiced conventional medicine. I've always practiced what I call integrative medicine, which is the thoughtful combination of many different systems with a healing perspective. I'm director of a program in integrative medicine at the University of Arizona, where we're trying to develop new models of medical education, new ways of training doctors to better equip them to serve consumers of health care. Part of that is going to be teaching doctors nutrition, which is something that's now really not taught in medical schools. I'd like to tell you a little bit about how my own beliefs evolved. First, they come from my own experience. I love to eat. I like to cook. I'm interested in food and health. They also come, as I said, from my studies in other cultures. I've always been very interested to see how different diseases occur in different cultures, whether we can make some inferences about relationship of diet and health by looking around the world, as well as looking to see whether there are particularly healthy diets out there that we could adapt to our own culture. They come from my studies of biochemistry and human nutrition, from my own research, and especially from a number of years of working with patients and using dietary change as a chief means of intervention, both to promote health and to deal with specific kinds of illnesses. Let me tell you what I hope this program will accomplish. I want to give you at least a quick overview of the basic facts of human nutrition, especially to equip you to dispel some of the confusion and deal with some of the myths out there about diet and health. I'd like to tell you about the relative importance of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats so you can understand what the best sources of those are, the right amounts to eat, the right combinations of them, how to prepare them, and so forth. I'd like to help you be better shoppers and to teach you how to read labels on food products so that you'll know whether any have particularly bad ingredients in them or are particularly good for you. I would like to teach you how to prepare food well and to enjoy preparing food. And I particularly want to equip you to be protected against some of the crazy nutritional philosophies that are out there today. You know, a lot of these diets, there's no question that you can lose weight short term on some of these diets that are being popularized, but as long-term strategies for eating, they are not healthy, and some of them are actually dangerous. And then I want to give you some specific advice about how to put together an optimum diet. That is one that will maximally protect your health, and especially as you age, and guarantee that you'll reach your older years in good health. And I want to also emphasize that eating has many purposes other than just serving health. You know, it's a primary means of identifying yourself, of enjoying social connection, of experiencing pleasure. You know, I don't want to sacrifice any of those principles in telling you how to eat. And I will not promise anything that I can't deliver. I'm not going to tell you that there's a way of eating that's going to make you live forever, or that will grow hair, or that will enable you to lose weight magically without changing the amount that you eat. But I certainly will give you recommendations for a best diet. And I'm going to try as much as possible to give you practical advice that you can take away from this program and implement. Advice about dining out, about purchasing food, preparing food, about using specific foods to treat particular medical conditions. And if there's one idea that you take away from this, it should be that there is no opposition between eating for health and eating for pleasure. I think many people, right, many people in our culture think that if it's good for you, you're not going to like it. And I'm here to tell you that's not so, that it is possible to get as much or more pleasure out of healthy food as it is out of unhealthy food. So let me begin by outlining for you a number of principles that underlie my philosophy. You know, I call these principles of eating well. And just to start, the first one is that we have to eat to live. I mean, that's obvious. You know, our bodies require energy. The beating of the heart, circulation of the blood, movement of digestive organs, all of these are energetic phenomena. And they are powered by the metabolic engine of our body. That engine needs fuel. The source of all fuel ultimately is the sun. Calories represent solar energy that has been captured by green plants, stored by them, and transformed into forms that other organisms can use. That's a very neat trick that these plants do. Plants eat light. That frees them, by the way, of the existential problem that we have of having to live at the expense of other life. We have to eat plants that have captured sunlight or eat the flesh of animals that have eaten plants. Beyond fuel as a basic requirement for life, eating is a major source of pleasure. Psychologists call it a primary reinforcer, meaning that it has tremendous power to shape behavior. This is something you can see in all animals. If you take a hungry animal and present it with food after it does something that you want it to do more frequently, it'll do it more frequently. And that's the way the trainers are able to shape animal behavior in utterly amazing directions for performances in circuses and movies, for example. I think it's important to note that not all of us respond to food in the same way, that there are some people who do not experience pleasure from food as their primary source of pleasure. Maybe they get it from sex, maybe they get it from other things. Because eating is a source of pleasure, it can become the focus of addictive behavior. Addictive eating is actually a more difficult problem to treat than drug addiction, because while people can live without drugs, they can't live without eating. I think it's important to realize that when people eat addictively and excessively, often they're trying to self-medicate, because eating has powerful effects on brain chemistry. You know, many people who eat immoderately and addictively are actually trying to decrease anxiety, to treat depression, to affect body energy levels. I think that makes excessive and addictive eating more interesting than simply looking at it as an unhealthy habit. But I think for many people, eating is a primary source of pleasure. By the way, one observation that I've made is that many of the experts out there who tell us how to eat are not the people who enjoy food. And no, that's just been my observation. And they don't get it, that a very important aspect of eating is pleasure. That can't be sacrificed in trying to design a healthy diet. So I just want to emphasize as a basic principle underlying this philosophy, again, that food that is healthy and food that gives pleasure are not mutually exclusive. And that is the single most important philosophy of my program. Next, eating is a very important focus of social interaction. The act of sharing food with another person or other people is a fundamental human bond. This is, again, something you can observe in the animal world. The word companion in English comes from the Latin root for bread. A companion is someone that you eat bread with. In Japanese, there is a phrase for an intimate companion is someone who eats rice from the same bowl. So I think this is a perception that has been seen around the world. And if you think about the ways that people come together around eating, you can see how important this is in our lives, whether it's power breakfasts, business lunches, romantic dinners. And here again, this principle has to be respected, because if a diet that you propose to people interferes with social connectivity, if you are eating in a way that makes it impossible for you to share the same kind of food with other people, that's not going to work. I think it's also important to keep in mind that how we eat reflects and defines our personal and cultural identity. I think that many social groups define themselves in part by what they do eat and what they don't eat. Other people eat that. We eat this. Other people eat that. And there are culture-specific foods that are enjoyed in some cultures that other cultures can't get a handle on at all. The ways that we eat, what we do eat and what we don't eat, is a strongly part of our definition of who we are. I think it's also very important to understand that how we eat is one determinant of health. And in that sentence, I want to underline the word one. Eating is not the sole determinant of health. Eating, how we eat, is one aspect of lifestyle. There are many other aspects of lifestyle that have to be considered in looking at people's health. But eating's important, and one reason it's important is that potentially you have total control over it. You can't always control the quality of air you breathe, the amount of stress that you experience, but really, when it comes down to it, you determine what goes into your mouth. And it's a shame to squander that control when it's there for you to use in the service of health. I also want to emphasize very strongly that my experience as a physician is that changing how you eat can be a very powerful strategy for managing disease and restoring health. As a physician who practices integrative medicine, I almost always recommend to patients that they make changes in diet. And I think that over the years, the benefits that I've seen, both in promoting health and dealing with specific disease conditions, is great. And this is really the basis of a new kind of medicine that I would call nutritional medicine. Let me give you one case example of nutritional medicine in action. Recently, I saw a 70-year-old woman whose complaint was lifelong asthma, very severe. She was dependent on steroids, had many hospitalizations, and had to use a great deal of medication. She had grown up in Wisconsin and was a very heavy consumer of dairy products, which she always thought were very healthy for her. I told her that in many people, eating milk and milk products worsens asthma, and that it would be worth making an experiment of cutting that out. She was very surprised at that. She said no doctor had ever suggested that to her, and it was such a basic part of her diet. But she did the experiment, and after just a month of not eating dairy products, there was significant improvement in her asthma, particularly noteworthy because it was in winter when she was usually worst. This is just one example of how a dietary manipulation can be used to treat a medical condition. That's nutritional medicine in action. That's a field in its infancy at the moment. Infancy, in part, because nutrition is not taught in medical schools, as I said. There are two aspects to nutritional medicine that I think are important. The first is designing an optimum diet that will promote health and longevity. And the second is treating specific disease conditions through dietary change. And my hope is that in coming years, as doctors become more sophisticated about nutrition, that nutritional medicine will take its proper place in the realm of treatments. And I just go. And let me just touch on 7 key areas of lifestyle that I think are important. The first is diet, both knowing what foods to eat, what foods not to eat, how to prepare food for yourself, and so forth. Second is the use of dietary supplements. This is another area of great confusion. Many people tell me today that the experience of walking into a health food store is totally bewildering. And part of what I'd like to do is to give you some sense of which supplements are useful, which are not. I'm not in favor of taking a lot of pills, but I think there are some dietary supplements out there that are very useful that you should know about. Another key aspect of lifestyle is how you relax. How do you handle stress? What do you do to neutralize stress? We can't live without stress. That's impossible. Human life comes with stress. But I think there are strategies that you can do to neutralize stress or at least protect your body from its harmful effects. Two particular methods that I often recommend are breathing techniques. Simple breathing exercises that take very little time and no equipment and are very powerful. And another strategy is meditation, which doesn't necessarily mean putting on a robe and sitting cross-legged. Simply sitting and observing your breathing is a basic form of meditation. I think that exercise and physical activity clearly this is a key area of lifestyle. The more that I study exercise, and an idea that I have is that intense, isolated workouts are not necessarily the most useful form of physical activity. That rather, it's the sum total of activity throughout a day that really keeps you fit. I think it's good to move and be in motion and, all the little stuff, housework, going upstairs, gardening. It's that sum total of activity that I think really conditions the body and maybe more important than workouts. Another very important aspect of lifestyle that we inquire about very much of our patients is what I would call connectedness. I think living in isolation promotes illness. And whether that connection is to a spouse, a lover, friends, co-workers, pets, plants, nature, I think it all counts. But I think that you have to establish connections beyond yourself, or you're prone not only to psychological problems, but physical ones as well. I also feel that play is a very important aspect of lifestyle, and I always inquire of patients what they do for fun, what they do for enjoyment. And when people look off into space and say they really don't know, I worry. I think play and having fun is key. And by the way, I think it's also good to look at your attitudes toward your work. Is work something that you enjoy? Do you get satisfaction from it? I think having satisfying work is a key to a healthy life as well. And finally, I would emphasize the importance of rest. I think that our bodies need adequate rest. We need sleep of adequate amount and good quality. I think it's very good to learn how to clear your mind of disturbing thoughts before you go to sleep and so forth. At any rate, these aspects of lifestyle you have control over. And these are all areas in which you can work. And in talking to you tonight about diet and health, I don't mean to suggest that this is the only or the most important aspect of lifestyle in determining the whole equation of health. I really discovered the joy of cooking when I was in medical school. When I had a long stretch of being on the wards, I would come home in such awful states of mind. I would have to detoxify. And the way that I learned to do that, I would take a shower, change my clothes, and then I would cook something. And the act of chopping vegetables, cooking, manifesting what was in my mind centered me, made me relax, put me in a good space of mind. And it really has worked that way for me. By the way, I won't even go into great detail of what I got to eat when I was a medical student and the quality of food in hospitals and what's served to patients and what serves to doctors. That should be a national scandal. When you shop for food, it is very important to train yourself to read labels. We're fortunate to live at a time and a place when food labeling is as good as it has ever been. Just some basic principles. If I pick up a product and there are so many ingredients that they can barely fit on the label, I'll usually put that product back on the shelf. If it's a product, I often will think, if I were going to make this at home, what would I use to make it? And then compare what's in the product. And if there's too much there, that's not stuff I would use in it when I make it home, I put it back on the shelf. You should always check the calories that you're getting, the total calories, and there's something you have to be real careful of there because you have to make sure that the serving size on the label is really what you would eat. I've seen bags of chips that I could easily eat half of, in no time, and the bag says this contains 12 servings, and the calories are given per serving. So that can be very deceptive. You want to make sure that the amount you eat is realistic. I think you also want to pay attention to the total fat content of that food. I think it's a good idea to look at listings for particular kinds of micronutrients, make sure you're not getting too much sodium there, for example, in a food, to make sure you're not getting too much saturated fat. You know, these are all things that are available to you, and often it just takes a few seconds to look at it. But these are just some basic rules. And then there are some key words that my eye goes right to. You know, if I see partially hydrogenated anything, I put it back on the shelf. You know, these artificially hardened fats are very toxic for us. This is the kind of thing that builds up in used cooking fat, and many foods, most baked goods, all that stuff is full of partially hydrogenated vegetable oils, very bad for the health of our hearts and arteries, probably promoting of cancer as well. You know, you don't want to eat that. So that's just an automatic rejection. So you really want to train yourself to be good label detectives. And then, you know, I hope you will also discover the joy of cooking and the ways that you can use food preparation. You know, it's a great thing to do with other people. It's also a great test of human relationships, I find. If you can cook with another person, you know, that is an ultimate test of compatibility. I urge you to be creative and imaginative, you know, not to be locked into any intellectual scheme for eating, to improvise. You know, I love being able to go into somebody's kitchen and prepare a meal, just whatever's there, you know, to take whatever's there and make something. Or to go into a food store with no idea of what I'm going to make, and just based on what looks good or what's absolutely fresh, to decide I'm going to take that home and cook it. And, you know, this is a very powerful way that you can influence the health of your whole family. So I urge you to, you know, if you're scared of cooking, if you feel like you don't have time for it, you know, experiment, because it is really possible not only to learn to make healthy food, but to make healthy food that's easy. You know, I hate cookbooks with recipes that don't work, especially if they're incredibly time-consuming and use all sorts of strange ingredients. You know, I really like things that are easy to make and delicious and healthy. And again, all that's possible. I get a lot of questions about different cooking methods, things like, are microwave ovens safe and so forth. I'll just answer a few of these common questions. You know, microwaving is very convenient for defrosting food rapidly or rapidly heating food. I don't think it's a safe method for long cooking, because there is some evidence that microwaving actually changes the chemistry of food, especially proteins, and may produce altered molecules that aren't so good for us. And anyway, it's not a great method of cooking. The results of it are not terrific. So I think you should keep microwaves for very short-term, rapid heating of food. And I hope you all know that you should never microwave in anything other than ceramic or glass, because microwaves can drive plastic molecules into food. So you never want to microwave anything in plastic wrap or plastic containers. It's just a useful thing to know about. So I'd like you to try to think of yourself as an alchemist in the kitchen, that you're taking the best possible ingredients and combining them and transforming their qualities into qualities that are going to be most helpful for you and are going to promote longevity and happiness. In the next segment, you'll hear about a popular diet that is dangerous for your health and why. I will clear up the confusion about carbohydrates, fats, and proteins and explain the important roles they play in your diet. And here's another recommendation for Optimum Health. Watch this public television station as a member. You'll begin to feel better right now by calling the number on your screen. Thank you.
We'll return to Eating Well for Optimum Health in just a few moments. Hello, I'm Bill Buckmaster, but right now we want to support this public broadcasting station. Make a call to this public broadcasting station so that we can continue to bring you health-informed programs like this. When you call in and make a pledge at the $90 level, we would be delighted, as our thank you gift to you, to send you this entire program. Actually, it has 20 additional minutes of Eating Well for Optimum Health on this tape. That's yours as our thank you for $90. With me in the studio tonight, we are delighted to have Dr. Andrew Weil. Dr. Weil, thanks for being with us.
Pleasure to be here.
This is your third special, I believe, for public broadcasting. You could have chosen many different areas to introduce this program. Why public broadcasting?
I watch public broadcasting myself, and the viewership of stations like this is exactly the viewership I want to reach with my message. I think it's the most intelligent and articulate, influential audience out there.
And you yourself are a member of public broadcasting.
Absolutely.
Tell me, we've had some viewer questions already. Soy seems to keep coming up. What does soy do for you?
I think soy is great, and in populations in Asia that eat a lot of soy, there's far lower incidence of breast cancer, prostate cancer. Whole soy foods have wonderful fiber. They have an oil that's heart healthy. but mainly they have this great cancer protective quality about them.
And soy is covered in the book Eating Well for
Absolutely.
Optimum
There's quite a
Health.
lot of detail about soy and ways of preparing soy foods.
What was the genesis for this book? How did you decide to do it?
I think there is so much confusion out there about diet and health today. First of all, there's so many fad diets, mostly for weight loss, but completely contradictory. Some telling you to eat as little fat as possible, some telling you to eat as little carbohydrate as possible. I think people are really confused, and more so than ever. So I wrote this book to cut through that confusion.
Okay, Jenny Press is standing by to tell us about some wonderful thank you opportunities we have for the viewers of public broadcasting. Jenny?
Thank you very much, Bill. I'm Jenny Prisk, and I'm delighted to be with you at this public television station to urge you to make that telephone call right now. Dr. Weil is staying with us in the studio throughout this program. You can continue to call. Now, let me tell you about the thank you premiums that are available to you. At $90, you are able to receive the VHS of this program that you're watching right now and learning so much from. Then at $120, we also add Dr. Weil's book, Eating Well for Optimum Health. And that is the book alone. And at $175, that's when you get them both, the book and the VHS. They are yours only when you call this public television station and say, yes, I want to turn on to Optimum Health, to Dr. Weil's book. You have to make the telephone call right now. There is no time like the present. The phones will be open and you can call right throughout the program. Dr. Weil will stay with us throughout the program. It's over to you. Support public television, support your own health. Get the videotape at $90, the book at $120 a year, and $175 for them both. Bill, back to you.
Jenny, it really is up to the viewers of public broadcasting to make the decision right now to say yes to public broadcasting and programs like the one with Dr. Weil tonight, Eating Well for Optimum Health. Another viewer question. This one pertains to tomatoes and the prostate.
Tomatoes are very good for prostate health, but they have to be cooked, and there has to be some fat present. Tomatoes contain a pigment called lycopene that probably reduces the risk of prostate cancer. So a flavorful marinara sauce made with olive oil, that's a good way to get it.
And, of course, that will be covered in Eating Well for Optimum Health.
Yes, there's some recipes there that tell you how to do that, and the details are there.
When you decided to decide what would be included in the book, how did you go about deciding the material?
You know, I'm at the University of Arizona in our program in integrative medicine. We're developing a curriculum, a nutritional curriculum for physicians. So I wanted to put the basis of that curriculum in here. So it really is a primer on nutrition, and then a lot of practical questions answered about diet and health.
Dr. Weil, many people say they just don't have the opportunity to eat right. They're in a hurry. We're all stressed out from our jobs. How do you find the opportunity to take that time?
Well, I give a lot of advice in this book about how to eat out wisely, about how to shop wisely, and all of the recipes in here are designed to be quick and easy to make, as well as delicious and healthy.
Well, we've got some excellent thank you gifts for you right now when you call this public broadcasting station. For $90, we have the complete program, actually Eating Well for Optimum Health. This has some additional bonus material that is not included on the program that you are seeing. This program, about 20 extra minutes, in fact. And, of course, the book, Eating Well for Optimum Health, that's yours for a pledge of $120. If you would like the VHS and the book, the combination, that's yours for a pledge of $175. But the important thing is that you make that call to this public broadcasting station so that we can continue to provide the programs that give you this wealth of information that Dr. Weil has provided with Eating Well for Optimum Health. It's your call. It's your decision. You are, in effect, deciding what you want to see on public broadcasting. Make that call right now. It's important that you do. Jenny Priss is standing by.
Thank you, Bill. And I just want to echo what you just said, that to receive Dr. Weil's book, Eating Well for Optimum Health, means that you have to do one very simple thing now, and that is go to your telephone, make a call, get the VHS for $90, a pledge of $90, get the book for a pledge of $120, get them both for $175. Not only will you learn how to eat well for optimum health, you will be increasing the health of this public television station. Only $90 for the VHS. this excellent program that you're watching right now, and then only $120 gives you the book. $175 does both for you. It means that you can, for the rest of your life, continue to eat your way to optimum health. The health of public television is in your hands. It's extremely important that you call the number on your screen right now, and thank you.
Jenny, it's very exciting. The phones are ringing. People are responding. They're responding to this program. And Dr. Weil is with us here in studio. Dr. Weil, so many of us seem to crave salt. They have to take that salt and just pour it on the food.
You know, I really think that's a learned preference, and it's one that can be easily unlearned. About 20% of the population might be salt sensitive, and those people will retain fluid, and salt can really disturb blood pressure in them and so forth. Other people may not be as affected, but it's an easy preference to unlearn. You can start by not adding salt to food at the table, eating snack foods not coated with salt. It's an easy one to change.
And, of course, salt is covered in the book, Eating Well for Optimum Health, all sorts of health questions. You yourself are a cook.
I love to cook. I get great pleasure from it. It's very meditative for me. I like chopping vegetables. I like making order. I like feeding people good food. And I like things that are, as I said, easy to make, delicious, and healthy.
There are, it seems like, tons of diet books out there on the market. What do you say generally about diet?
You know, there is a chapter in the book on sensible weight loss. I think the basic rule is you have to increase activity and decrease the amount you eat. And rather than making drastic rearrangements of proportions of carbohydrate and fat and protein in the diet, it's best to cut calories across the board. I think the main ways to do that are to decrease portion size and to decrease snacking.
All right, there are all sorts of wonderful pieces of information, health information, that we are offering as a thank you tonight. $90 for the videotape of the program Eating Well for Optimum Health. Then we, of course, have for you, we've got the book at $120. But if you would like the tape and the book, we're making that available to you tonight for $175. That's the combination. This gives you the complete information of the material that's covered and then some in the show and the book, Eating Well for Optimum Health with Dr. Andrew Weil. All that material is available for you. It's there. Dr. Weil will be with us during the next break. The folks are going to stay here and be answering questions during the program. So please keep calling. It's important that you make that call because every one of those calls goes to continue to support this public broadcasting station.
We're back with Eating Well for Optimum Health with Dr. Andrew Weil.
You've heard that fat is bad for you, or is it carbohydrates, not fat, that are the root of all evil? If you're a vegetarian, everyone wants to know where are you getting your protein. Let me help you figure this out. I'm going to talk to you about the macronutrients. That word means the big foods. They are carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. These are primarily sources of caloric energy. In addition, protein has specialized function for providing other molecules that the body needs. I'll start with carbohydrates because these are the simplest foods. When plants capture sunlight, they use it to bind molecules of water and molecules of carbon dioxide together, and they use that solar energy to forge the chemical bonds to put those into a molecule of glucose. The most specialized cells in the body are brain cells. The brain, its preferred food is glucose. Under certain conditions, it can be forced to burn other things. But for practical purposes, the brain needs a constant, steady supply of blood sugar. If that stops within a very short time, unconsciousness will result. The brain is totally dependent on a steady supply of glucose. Now, in America especially, nutritionists have been stuck in what is now a very outmoded way of viewing these carbohydrate foods. And we have been told that it's good to eat complex carbohydrates and not so good to eat too much simple carbohydrate. That is a meaningless distinction and a very unuseful way of viewing carbohydrate foods. There is a newer way of looking at them that has become very popular in science in Europe and in other parts of the English-speaking world, and I hope it will begin to catch on in America. And that is that rather than looking at whether carbohydrates are simple or complex, sugars or starches, to look at how fast different carbohydrates are converted to blood sugar. This can be measured and rated in a quantity called the glycemic index that you have probably heard of, and it is a much more useful way of understanding carbohydrates and understanding their relative effects on our health. When a carbohydrate food is digested, it is turned by the body into glucose, but the rate of doing that is influenced by many different factors. One is the chemical nature of the carbohydrate. Another one is the mechanical nature of the food. For example, when you take a starch, such as the starch in grains of wheat, and mill it to an extremely fine powder, flour, you create an enormous surface area for enzymes to work on. So there is a huge difference between putting a grain of wheat in your stomach or a cracked grain of wheat in your stomach and putting a product made from white flour. There is a much, much faster conversion of a flour product to blood sugar. When blood sugar rises, this creates problems for the body. High levels of sugar in the blood are extremely toxic, and the body has to get rid of them very quickly. The higher the glycemic index of a food, and there's an arbitrary scale in which glucose is given a arbitrary number of 100, and anything lower than that is converted to blood sugar more slowly. Generally, if something has a glycemic index under about 55 or so, we say it has a low glycemic index. A lot of the carbohydrate foods that we eat in our culture are very high glycemic index carbohydrates. But, there are some surprises here. Sugar, common table sugar, sucrose, consists of a molecule of glucose linked to a molecule of fructose, fruit sugar. The body has a very limited ability to metabolize fructose, so it has a very low glycemic index. And the combination of those two molecules put table sugar kind of in the intermediate range. So this is the food, we've heard that this is a simple carbohydrate, it's supposed to be not good. But actually, the glycemic index of table sugar is not that great. On the other hand, the glycemic index of a rice cake, which many people think of as an austere diet food, is very, very high because of the chemical nature of the starch and the fact that these grains are puffed and exploded. So again, there's a huge surface area for enzymatic digestion. Eating a lot of high glycemic index foods seems to correlate in many people, not all, but in many people, with obesity, with hypertension, with an increased tendency to develop adult-onset diabetes, and a condition called insulin resistance, in which the body becomes less sensitive to the effects of insulin. This syndrome is common, but not universal. There are estimates that 25 to 30% of our population may be sensitive to carbohydrates in this way, and more of us might be intermediately sensitive. But the bottom line here is that the glycemic index of carbohydrates is something to pay attention to and learn about. Now, if you've read the anti-carbohydrate literature that's out there, of which there's plenty today, there's a lot of voices telling us that we shouldn't eat carbohydrate foods, that these are dangerous. And they use this information about glycemic index. But it's distorted in a lot of these books. For one thing, many of these writers fail to point out that there are differences in these categories of even relatively high glycemic index carbohydrate foods. For example, many of these writers put bread and pasta into the same breath. But in fact, pasta has a significantly lower glycemic index than bread because it's not puffed and exploded like that by the action of yeast. And you can reduce the glycemic index of pasta even further by cooking it al dente in the Italian manner. If Americans go to Italy, often the pasta we're served there seems undercooked. But it's good to learn to like pasta that way because the denser core of the pasta is less susceptible to the action of digestive enzymes, so there is a slower conversion to blood sugar. So I think the fact that carbohydrates are such simple foods that the body can so easily get energy from, the fact that the brain really depends on a steady supply of glucose for its life and function, to me suggests that these are very valuable elements of the diet. And I think to cut out carbohydrates or to reduce them down to very low levels is not healthy long term. One of the worst things out there that I have a lot of concerns about are products sweetened with high fructose corn syrup, which is ubiquitous now. This is early in the century, food manufacturers learned to make a sweet syrup from corn. Originally, they did it through a purely chemical method, and now it's done through an enzymatic process that produces a syrup that's very high in fructose. Manufacturers love this. This is in everything. If you start reading labels, it's in all fruit juices, syrups, jellies, jams, and so forth. It's cheaper than sucrose, and it's sweeter. But, as I said to you, the body has a very limited ability to handle fructose. You can maintain life with intravenous glucose, but if you try to give somebody intravenous fructose, very quickly it produces very serious liver dysfunction and death. In terms of how much carbohydrate people should eat, my recommendation is that it should be about 50 to 60% of total calories. I think that is a healthy range of carbohydrate to eat. Let me go on to talk about fat. There has been, I think, tremendous misinformation in our culture about fat and health. We're just coming out of an era where fat was the bad guy, into an era where now people are looking at carbohydrates. I think both of these views are extreme, and they both have bits of the truth and not the whole truth. We need fat in our diets for various things. It's a very concentrated source of caloric energy. It's suitable for long-term storage. The body it can burn fat. Some tissues are very good at burning fat, others are less so. The kinds of fat that we eat are at least as important as the amounts of fat that we eat. During the era of anti-fat that we've just come out of, the view that was being put out there by the medical profession and many experts was that the percent of fat that people ate was the major determinant of health and longevity, and that the lower you could get that percentage of fat, the better off you were. In fact, we have a great deal of scientific evidence that one kind of fat, saturated fat, is very bad for health. This is the fat that's solid at room temperature that mostly comes from animals. There's a few vegetable sources like palm and coconut oil. But these fats, especially milk fat, beef fat, poultry fat, these saturated fats have a high correlation with cardiovascular disease. Very, very good evidence for that. Getting the percentage of saturated fat down in the diet is clearly useful. But many people assume that we have comparable scientific evidence regarding total fat and health, and we absolutely don't. In fact, in some populations that are very healthy, the amount of total fat in the diet is quite high. You've heard a lot about the Mediterranean diet. I'm going to talk to you a little bit later. One area that's been intensively studied is the island of Crete. Cretans, that's Cretans with an A, eat diets that are about 40% fat by calories. That's right up there or above Americans, and have very low rates of cardiovascular disease and cancer. That must be very upsetting to the anti-fat camp. In addition, there have been some quite remarkable findings that have come out of recent studies. For example, a recent finding in the Harvard Nurses Study, which is one of the biggest longitudinal studies of large populations, was that women who ate mayonnaise and salad dressings frequently had better cardiovascular health than women who didn't. And this was interpreted as being that they were getting essential fatty acids, which are needed for optimal health, that people who were not eating those products weren't getting. Again, that kind of stuff must be very upsetting to the people that tell us we shouldn't be eating fat. Another one, in the anti-fat days, nuts, really bad stuff, right, because they're so high in fat. More and more evidence coming out that it is healthy to eat nuts, and that eating, yeah, good, nuts are good. These are sources of essential fatty acids, of vitamin E, of fiber, of minerals, and there are clear correlations that people who eat nuts, they have to be good quality nuts, fresh and so forth, that people who eat nuts are healthier than people who don't. So, I think there is a changing view coming about here. We can argue about what is the right percentage of fat to have in the diet, but there's a practical problem. If you try to lower fat in the diet, when you get it below a certain level, food really becomes unpalatable. I think if you try to get total dietary fat below 20%, you really quickly run into problems. And if you tell people that they should be on 10% fat diets, I don't think you can really do that unless you have a professional chef or live at a spa to make food interesting and tasty. Western food really becomes boring when fat gets down to those levels. Fat is the vehicle of taste. A lot of the substances that affect our taste receptors are fat soluble, so fat carries them to our taste buds. And fat provides mouthfeel that's very satisfying. It's a very important aspect of the pleasure of food. I think the key is to understand what kinds of fats you should eat and what you shouldn't. I recommend a diet of 30% calories as fat. I think that, by the way, that is what the American Heart Association has recommended, but the anti-fat people have said that's way too high, it should be between 10 and 20. I don't agree with that. And I think you can even go higher if you're really careful about the kinds of fat that you eat. The kinds of fat that you should eat are primarily monounsaturated fats, which is olive oil, the fats that are in nuts, for example, avocados also. This kind of fat seems to have not an adverse effect on cholesterol levels. It seems to be the one that predominates in the Mediterranean countries, for example. Looks okay. And monounsaturated fat actually lowers bad cholesterol, but doesn't lower the good fraction of cholesterol. When you use the polyunsaturated vegetable oils, these lower both kinds of cholesterol. As medical doctors warned people about saturated fat, there was a period, especially in the 1960s and 1970s, when there was heavy promotion of using vegetable oils, polyunsaturated vegetable oils. These are not healthy either, for other reasons. They're chemically unstable, they react with oxygen, and they form compounds that are carcinogenic and promote inflammation and promote aging and are dangerous to health. So a lot of these things that you've heard of, safflower oil, sunflower oil, corn oil, sesame oil, all of that stuff, I would try to eliminate. Olive oil should be your major cooking fat. You also need to know that most people in our culture are seriously deficient in one category of essential fatty acids, what are called the omega-3 fatty acids. These are not easy to get in the diet. They are primarily in the fat of cold water fish, oily cold water fish, salmon, mackerel, sardines, herring. There are very few vegetable sources of them. They occur in flax seeds, hemp seeds, and walnuts. Walnuts are the only nut that has them. You want to acquaint yourself with the sources of these fats in the diet. Deficiency of them, I think, can produce disease in any system of the body. At any rate, one of the most important things you can do for your health is to increase your consumption of omega-3 fatty acids. This is getting easier. I mean, there's a new egg product on the market now. These are eggs from chickens that have been fed feed with algae in it that contains omega-3 fatty acids, so that these are concentrated in the yolk. And these eggs are now widely available. I think, by the way, eggs have gotten a bad rap over the years. I think eating an egg a day on average is fine, and especially if you're eating these new eggs from free-range chickens that have gotten these essential fatty acids in their food, or these new specially fortified eggs. But they're called high omega-3 eggs, fortified eggs. You'll see them in all stores now. But you really want to acquaint yourself with dietary sources of these essential fatty acids and increase consumption of them. Okay, finally, I want to talk to you about protein. The particular structure of protein makes possible the elasticity of our skin, the contractility of muscles. Proteins are also enzymes which catalyze all chemical reactions, such as the burning of glucose. Proteins also constitute receptors, which are the molecules that receive information, through which information is transmitted throughout the body. These have very important functions. I think there is, again, a tremendous amount of confusion about how much protein people should eat, what kind of protein is the best protein. On these anti-carbohydrate diets that are popular today, most people are eating enormous amounts of protein. That is not necessarily healthy. The problem is that if you take in more protein than the body needs to build and repair tissue or to make enzymes or receptors, it's going to burn the excess as fuel. And protein is not an ideal fuel. Here's why. First of all, these very complicated molecules take more work to disassemble and burn. So the efficiency of protein as a fuel is not nearly as great as that of fat and carbohydrate. But I think more important, protein is not a clean burning fuel. So I worry about the amount of protein that people are eating today in the name of being on a healthy diet in which carbohydrate is reduced to very low levels, usually to lose weight. I would recommend about 10 to 20% of calories as protein. Then you're faced with the big question of what kind of protein is optimal to eat. I'll just quickly go through some major categories. Meat has the advantage of having proteins that are more similar to our proteins. So these are very usable by the body. I think there are a lot of practical problems with meat as a major protein source. Just quickly. The animals that provide meat are large organisms that live at the top of food chains. So they accumulate all environmental toxins that have been eaten by lower organisms down on the food chain. So animals today have high concentrations in their flesh, in their fat, of environmental toxins, in addition, both natural toxins and artificial ones that have been released into the environment. The animal sources of meat are also main sources of saturated fat, which, as I've said, is not healthy for our cardiovascular system. And animal protein is also very dense protein, so it's easier to get overdoses of protein if you're relying on meat as your protein source. I think here's one of the areas in which Asian cultures are ahead of us, because most Asian cultures that use meat use it in relatively small amounts, cut up into dishes in which there's a great abundance of vegetables as well. You know, we don't do that. We like dense portions of meat, and many people in our culture, if you didn't serve them a dense portion of meat, would wonder where the main course was. You know, we think of that as the centerpiece of how we eat. Where's the beef? You know, milk and milk products are another major source of protein, and they have been heavily promoted by the dairy industry as healthy sources of calcium lifelong. I'm not so sure about that. You know, milk and milk products have several strikes against them. The first is that the sugar in milk is indigestible by many people in the world who are lactose intolerant. And to tell all people that milk should be a basic ingredient of human nutrition simply doesn't work for a large percentage of the world's population. The fat in milk is the most saturated fat in the diet. So in a sense, it's worse than the fat in meat, you know, because it's a higher percentage of saturated fatty acids, and something I think you need to be careful of. Cheese is probably one of the major source of saturated fat in the American diet. That doesn't mean you should not eat any cheese. You know, cheese is included in the Mediterranean diet, but in modest amounts. You know, it's not something that's eaten every day in very large quantities. Some animal foods are fine, but it is good to explore the world of vegetable protein. You know, and if you look there, I think that learning about soybeans and soy foods is excellent. There are many, many benefits to soy, and you know, if you're not yet friends with tofu or tempeh, it's good to do that. So in summary, you need carbohydrates, fats, and proteins in your diet in the right proportions, the right kinds and right amounts of these macronutrients. Next, you'll hear about a number of very different diets that experts have promoted for the title of Best Diet in the World. Then you'll hear my own recommendations for the optimum diet. Let me begin by saying that the optimum diet would not be complete without healthy program viewing. Public television has your best health in mind, just as I do. Take a moment right now to support healthy programming by calling the number on your screen. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Bill Buckmaster. We'll be returning to Eating Well for Optimum Health in just a moment. But first, we want to give you this opportunity to support this public broadcasting station by making a pledge right now. And when you do make a pledge, we have some very special thank you gifts for you. We have the entire program, Eating Well for Optimum Health, for a fulfilled pledge of $90. Now, actually, that has 20 minutes extra additional material that is not covered in the program. Also, we have the book, $120. A pledge of $120 will get you the book, Eating Well for Optimum Health. And here's a value for you, the combo for $175, the book and the tape. That's at a fulfilled pledge of $175. With us tonight in studio is Dr. Andrew Weil. Dr. Weil, wonderful information contained in this program and in the book, and we've been getting some calls here in the studio. One call pertaining to mushrooms.
Well, as you may know, I think mushrooms are great additions to the diet. Not necessarily the common button mushrooms, but especially many of these newer mushrooms from Asia, shiitake mushrooms.
Yeah, that was a specific
oyster
caller
mushrooms.
one.
You know, many of these have anti-cancer effects, immune-enhancing effects. Very useful to include in the diet and learn how to cook them.
And I suppose there's something about mushrooms in the book.
Good mushroom recipes in the book.
Good mushroom recipes in the book, Eating Well for Optimum Health. That's one of the thank you gifts that we have for you tonight for a pledge of $120. And, of course, we have the entire tape of Dr. Weil's program for $90. Jenny Priss is standing by. Jenny.
Thank you, Bill. And we are certainly standing by and waiting for your call. There is no time like right now to call this public television station and say, yes, I want to say yes to public broadcasting as well as to Optimum Health. Now, Bill's already told you a little bit about the premiums and thank yous. Let me tell you some more. For $90, you get the video, the VHS of this program you're watching right now, so you can play it again and again and learn more and more. Then, for $120, you can get the book. This is a phenomenal book, written, of course, by Dr. Andrew Weil, who's in the studio with us right through this whole program. And this is an amazing book. And then, for added value, $175, you'll receive the book and the videotape. These both on your shelf will just keep you living at Optimum Health for the rest of your life. And we change as we grow. We change in our tastes and our needs as far as food goes. Dr. Weil keeps you up to date with all of them. Now, public television changes and grows according to the things that you request and ask for. And what we want you to do right now is call in with your pledge of support. Say, yes, I want the videotape. Yes, I want the book. Whatever you call for, make sure that you support public television. Thank you.
Jenny, the phones have been ringing. Many folks calling in with questions for Dr. Weil. And Dr. Weil, we had a question about, I believe it was a diabetic who called in and wondering about sugar in the diet.
Well, actually, some forms of starch have a worse impact on insulin and on blood sugar than sugar itself. All that information you'll find in the book. I'm not a big fan of artificial sweeteners. I think they're all suspect, but there is a natural product that diabetics should learn about called stevia. And this is available in health food stores. You can find it on the internet. It is natural, I think quite safe, and non-caloric.
And of course, I think it's important at this point to point out that you're a big supporter of public broadcasting, and that's why you're here,
Absolutely.
And that's why you chose public broadcasting for your new special.
I watch public broadcasting. I'm an enthusiastic supporter of public broadcasting stations, and I urge viewers out there to support this station as well.
All right, and we have some special thank yous for you right now when you make a pledge to public broadcasting, to this public broadcasting station. $90 for the VHS tape of Dr. Weil's Eating Well for Optimum Health, the program you're enjoying tonight, and of course the book that is loaded with all sorts of wonderful health information for you about eating right. $120 for the book. If you want the tape and the book, we have a combo for you, $175. We would be delighted to send you the book and the tape of Dr. Weil's Eating Well for Optimum Health. Jenny, how are we doing? The phones are ringing.
Phones are sounding wonderful, Bill. Thank you. You're doing some wonderful work there with Dr. Weil. We do urge you to call this public television station right now because you ensure that the programs that you ask for throughout the year, that you value, that you want to watch and want your family to watch, will stay on your television screen through this public broadcasting station. So it's entirely over to you. You can see our volunteers there. They are answering maybe your call, or if it's your neighbor's call, it should be yours. Now, when you do go to your telephone and make a call, for $90, you can receive the VHS of this program, this excellent informative program you're watching right now. At a level of $120, you'll receive the book, Eating Well for Optimum Health, a superb book full of factual information. It's not just filled with pictures or cartoons, it's full of facts that will help you for the rest of your life. Now, for added value at $175, you can choose the book and the videotape. And then sit back knowing that you have not only supported Optimum Health for yourself and your family throughout the rest of your life and their lives, but also the lives of this public television station. Back to you, Bill.
It is very exciting when we hear these phones ringing, and they are ringing. You are responding. That's wonderful because your support is what keeps programs like Dr. Weil's special on the air. And Dr. Weil is with us in studio, and one of the questions that we have for Dr. Weil is, one of the things covered in the book is something called the worst diet in the world. What in the world is that?
Well, you know, after I give all the information about carbohydrates, fats, proteins, micronutrients, I asked readers to see if they can design the worst diet in the world, one that would be most likely to promote ill health. And then after you do that, to go to a fast food restaurant of your choice and see how closely what people are eating there match that. I think American-type fast food has everything wrong about it, and we're successfully now exporting that all over the world.
Sometimes you are in a hurry, you have to go to a fast food place. Any recommendations?
Well, I think you want to avoid deep-fried food because the oils used there have been used and reused, and they're full of toxic compounds. You want to get as many vegetables as you possibly can.
All right, Dr. Weil has some wonderful information in his book, Eating Well for Optimum Health.
You are learning so many interesting facts about the right foods to eat, the right approach to take to your diet, all from charming Dr. Weil, who is in the studio with us right now. And you can continue this relationship with Dr. Weil by calling in right now and making sure that you get the videotape for $90 a year. Maybe you would like to get the book, Eating Well for Optimum Health, at $120 pledge. Or maybe you'd like to get the great value at $175, the book and the videotape. These are issues, a book and a videotape that you can play and read over and over again, and I can guarantee you that you'll discover new information each time as you do. However, it does take a little bit of effort, and that means going to your telephone, calling the number on your screen and saying, yes, I want those premiums. Bill, back to you.
Many of the viewers have been calling in questions, and one that we had for Dr. Weil pertains with, of all things, blueberries. Blueberries good for you.
Another great food. They contain a sugar that has a very low impact on blood sugar, good fiber, and they're chock full of antioxidant pigments that protect against aging, that protect the immune system, so a very healthy food indeed.
So blueberries are good. Generally, you recommend the old fruits and vegetables.
I think what we're finding out about fruits and vegetables each day is that they're just full of protective compounds, and this is one of the important categories of things you want in your diet, protective chemicals from plants.
All right, all that good information is in Dr. Weil's book, Eating Well for Optimum Health. That's one of the thank you gifts that we have for you tonight. $90 for the VHS of the program that you're enjoying tonight. Also has some bonus material, about 20 minutes worth. $120 for the book, Eating Well for Optimum Health. And if you want the book and the VHS tape, we can take care of that as well. That would be yours for $175. That's the combo that we're offering tonight. But the important thing is that you make the call to support public broadcasting, this public broadcasting station. Let's go back to the program.
We're back with Eating Well for Optimum Health with Dr. Andrew Weil.
Let's look at some of the diets out there that experts have said might be the optimum diet for all of us. The first one is the Paleolithic diet. You know, there are a surprising number of experts who say that everything back in the Stone Age was wonderful and that people were much healthier and eating much better than we are today. This is seriously advanced as a thesis. I think, you know, first of all, it's very difficult to interpret this because probably in those days people were not living nearly as long as people are today, so they didn't really have a chance to develop the degenerative diseases that we do. There must have been very high rates of premature death from accidental injury, from deliberate injury, from infection and so forth. But that diet was very different from the modern diet. Principally, it was a low-carbohydrate diet because agriculture had not been invented, so there weren't cereal grains. So people were mostly eating game, maybe some wild tubers and fruits and nuts if they got them, fowl, fish, and so forth. So it was probably much higher in protein, much lower in carbohydrate than the modern diet. It was much better in essential fatty acids because the animal foods that these people were eating were animals that grazed on wild plants that provided these essential fatty acids. And it was also a principal advantage of it was that it was very, very low or absent in refined or processed foods. And I think, the more that I've looked at, when you think about what's good, what's bad looks like processing. In almost every category of food, the more we take it and mess with it, the more we refine it, the more we destroy its inherent healthful qualities and increase problems with it. So that's the great virtue of the Paleolithic diet. But I don't see Paleolithic cuisine becoming the fast food of tomorrow. And I don't agree with people who say, as some people do, that the invention of agriculture was the beginning of the road to ruin. This thesis is also out there. There are many people who try to say that the domestication of cereal plants led to huge increases in human populations, tremendous impact on blood sugar and insulin levels that created a lot of modern diseases, but also allowed populations to reach densities where urbanization became possible, and this was the beginning of all social ills, including maldistribution of wealth and inequality of the sexes, and so forth. So, I mean, that's an interesting thesis. I don't really believe that. I think agriculture has its virtues, and being a botanist and plant lover, I think that the domestication and human cultivation of plants has many positive attributes. And I think that these cereal grains, if they're used in better forms, meaning less processed, less refined, not turned into this infinitely pulverized stuff with huge surface areas that makes all of this kind of fluffy, these fluffy products out there, I think they're great. So again, chewy, grainy, dense breads, that stuff is fine. Pasta in moderate quantities that's cooked so it offers resistance to the teeth. These foods do not have destructive effects on blood sugar if they're eaten in reasonable quantities. Another diet that has been advocated as being optimum is a raw foods diet. You know, if the Paleolithic diet was great, why not even go further back before the invention of cooking? There are people that say that cooking destroys all the healthful properties of food. Here's one that I really don't agree with. There are several problems with eating only raw food. One of them is that many of the healthful elements in food become available, or much more available to the body after cooking. And just as an example, carotenoid pigments in fruits and in vegetables are not very available to the body in raw forms. That doesn't mean you should never eat raw carrots, but cooked carrots are a much, much better source of carotenoids. So you want to eat a mix of raw and cooked foods. And I think this is, you know, something you see in many categories of food. In addition, there are a number of toxins in nature, in plants. And most of these toxins, these are natural toxins. Most of these natural toxins are easily broken down or destroyed by cooking. So not only are you not getting everything that your body needs from all raw foods, but you might be getting too much of things that your body doesn't want. So I think I don't think that food should be entirely cooked either. We should eat a mix of raw and cooked foods. I don't think an all raw foods diet is an optimum diet. Another diet that has been advanced as being optimum is a vegan diet. That is one in which there are no animal products. You can't get all of the elements that you need on a vegan diet. A principal problem is vitamin B12, which is necessary for normal function of the bone marrow and normal nerve function. B12 is only found in animal products, and if you eat a diet devoid of animal products, sooner or later you will develop B12 deficiency, which can be very serious. To me, that's a sign that that's not what we're meant to do. I have had some very delicious vegan food. I think that, you know, if food is prepared skillfully, you can make very tasty dishes with no animal products, but I don't think many people in our culture are going to find that a reasonable way to eat all the time. So I would say that's not a good candidate for the optimum diet. Another diet that I have looked at a lot is the traditional Japanese diet. Now, I have to say here that that phrase is a little problematical because the traditional Japanese diet probably only existed for a very short period of time. Before World War II, Japanese were eating insufficient protein. They were really not eating that many fresh vegetables. They were eating mostly pickled vegetables. That was not the optimal diet. And today, most Japanese are shifting to eating Western food. So there was a very narrow window in which we call the traditional Japanese diet existed. But in principle, I think it's great. This is a diet that is very unusual in having such a low percentage of fat, about 10% fat, and being tasty. Now, as I said, it's very hard to do that with Western food, but the Japanese have managed to do that. The principal carbohydrate is rice, which may offer great advantages over white flour. You know, because, again, these are grains, and I think one reason why Asian people may not see the kind of obesity that we see here is that they're not eating their carbohydrate in finely pulverized form. The Japanese diet relies on fish as a major source of protein. There's heavy inclusion of soy at almost all meals. There's an incredible variety of vegetables, you know, very good fruit in season, sea vegetables, which are sources of omega-3 fatty acids. Green tea is a principal beverage with all of its protective effects. Very interesting things we could learn from that. However, I don't think the Japanese diet is that transportable, except to Japanese restaurants. For one thing, it includes a number of very strange foods that Westerners would find difficult to accept, and also it's very labor-intensive. It takes a lot of work to prepare Japanese food. So it's fine to eat in restaurants, but I can't see too many people doing this at home. But I think there are principles of the Japanese diet that we could take and use, such as incredible variety, really especially a great variety of vegetables, inclusion of wild vegetables, sea vegetables, soy, green tea. Also, I would say artful presentation of food. I think Japanese food is certainly the most visually appealing and appealing to the senses of any cuisine. That Japanese dishes are works of art and fun. That certainly is a principle that we could adapt. I think also interesting in the traditional Japanese diet, there's really very little sweet stuff. The Japanese don't go for sweet, rich desserts. Their main sweet is sweetened red bean paste or fruit. Nothing like the kind of sugar stuff that we see that goes on in our culture. Another diet that has been much in the news is the Mediterranean diet. People began to study this 20, 30 years ago, looking at the diets in a number of countries in the Mediterranean region, including the island of Crete, which I said where people are eating so much fat, and yet they're not having our diseases because their fat is good fat, and they're eating a lot of vegetables, a lot of fruits, fish, relatively little meat, some inclusion of dairy products, principally as yogurt and some cheeses, whole grain breads. Now, again, in looking, I think the Mediterranean diet is a good basic template that we could adapt here because this is a diet that most people like in all parts of the world, relatively easy to prepare, very tasty food, interesting, and yet apparently very healthy in terms of low incidence of diseases in these cultures. I want to emphasize that the secret of good health in Mediterranean countries is not necessarily just diet. In those countries, traditionally, people had a lot of regular physical activity. There's very strong social connection in villages around food. I think it's possible to create your own international diet. I don't think there's any one right way to eat. I think we're all different and nutritional needs change as you grow. But I think the principles of healthy eating are relatively constant. And whether you're eating Chinese food or Italian food, you can adapt those by using the right kinds of fat, the right kinds of carbohydrate, making sure you're getting plenty of the sources of micronutrients, and you can construct a diet that's interesting and that's satisfying and that will guarantee maximum health and longevity. Now, let me talk a bit about weight and weight loss. These diets that are out there, the crazy diets that everyone is on, the principal reason that most people go on these is not to promote health and longevity, it's to lose weight. I think losing weight is a national obsession in our culture, and I think the more we become obsessed about it, the more obese people I see in our culture. I don't think it's any great mystery why Americans are so fat. I think Americans are fat because they eat too much, and they eat too much of the wrong kinds of food, and they don't get enough activity. And the secret of losing weight is to eat less and to increase activity. And I think that the secret of weight loss also is not to do any drastic manipulation of macronutrients in the diet. It's not drastically lowering fat or drastically lowering carbohydrate. It's cutting calories across the board. You want to maintain 30% fat, 60% carbohydrate, 10 to 20% protein, but you want to decrease calories that you're taking in, and you want to increase activity. And I'm afraid that's the basic formula. I don't think there are any magic solutions out there. That's what you got to do. Now, I'm very interested in the fact that in my lifetime, there has been a great increase in the percentage of obesity in our population. Why? What's happened there? I think a major reason is that people are less active. Despite all the fitness stuff, I think a large proportion of our population is more sedentary than they were when I was a kid. And I would say that a couple of things that contribute to that are computers, television, video games among young people. I think all of those have sucked young people into much greater immobility than when I was growing up. And I think people are also eating more in that they're eating more frequently. That is, people eat throughout the day. The explosion of snack foods is a relatively modern phenomenon, and if you look at those foods, what are they? They tend to be the very worst kind of carbohydrate. It's products made from corn, from finely pulverized corn or wheat or potato starch, fried in unhealthy fat. devoid of the protective micronutrients, too high in salt. And that has become a pattern of eating in this country that I think really wasn't present before. It's interesting also to look at cultures in which obesity is rare. There's been a lot written about the so-called French paradox, why French people have lower than expected incidence of heart attacks than Americans, even though they're eating a lot of fat and animal foods. Actually, I think that's controversial. There's been, experts have said that the way that heart attacks are diagnosed in France may be different from here, that there's controversy about that. But where there's no controversy is that you don't see many fat French people. And it's a striking contrast when you come back to the United States from France. What are they doing different? They are eating, I think, much smaller portions than we are. They're not eating throughout the day. They're more active. I think, and until recently, they weren't eating the fast food in the quantities that we're eating. So I don't think there's mysteries there. What I do know is that it's vitally important for you to help children to develop good habits of eating. Habits of eating are developed early in life. They persist all through life. And children today are subjected to intense pressures from commercial sources, from peers, from when they go outside the house to eat the wrong kinds of foods. What can you do? You can set good role models for them by eating healthy food yourself. You can help them see and experience that good food, healthy food, is not different from delicious food. You really have to show them that. A very useful strategy is try to involve kids in food preparation. If you like to cook and like to make food, I think from a very early age, if you let children be part of that process, the whole idea of preparing food becomes interesting. They'll want to be part of it. That's one way that you can help get this philosophy across, because you're really up against a lot of unhealthy pressures out there in the real world. Here we are in a new millennium, and I think it would be a great priority to think about eating well, and eating well for optimum health. People are going to be living longer in our culture, and it's worth thinking about how you want to do that. Do you want to arrive in old age with your maximum potential, with as few aches and pains and as good function as possible? One of the main influences on that is diet and how you eat, and again, that's the one that you have total potential control over. And finally, remember that eating is a source of pleasure, of social interaction, a source of cultural and individual identity. You don't want to slight those qualities about eating. So make sure that the optimum diet provides plenty of pleasure, that it doesn't interfere with your social interactions, that it doesn't cause any kind of dissonance in how you see yourself and the culture that you live in. It's got to all fit with that. And I wish you all good health and a long and happy life filled with many pleasurable eating experiences. Thank you.
Dr. Weil's program may be over, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't call public broadcasting, this public broadcasting station, with your vote of support for programs like this. Let us hear from you now. Make that pledge to public broadcasting in support of Dr. Weil's Eating Well for Optimum Health.
This is PBS.
Hello, I'm Bill Buckmaster. The program may be over, but now is your opportunity to go to the phone and support this public broadcasting station. We want to send you some special thank you gifts with fulfilled pledges of $90. We have the entire program of in fact, it's not only the entire program, but 20 additional minutes of the program, Eating Well for Optimum Health. And of course, the book, Eating Well for Optimum Health, will be yours for a pledge of $120. And the combo, if you'd like the tape and the book, that's yours for a pledge of $175. Yes, the program is over, but the star of the program is still with us in studio, and the phones are ringing practically off the hook here. Dr. Weil, it's been a terrific evening. Lots of calls from viewers. Had one about migraine headaches. Are there certain foods that trigger migraines?
In some people with migraines, not all, but in some, there are clear dietary triggers. And the foods that are especially suspect are all forms of caffeine, especially coffee, chocolate, wine, especially red wine, strong flavored cheeses, aged cheeses like cheddar, Parmesan, things of that sort, fermented foods, including miso, fish like anchovies and sardines. Those are common things to experiment with.
Dr. Weil talks about chocolate in his book, Eating Well for Optimum Health. And I want to ask him quickly about chocolate because there is some confusion. Maybe for people with migraine headaches, not such a good thing. But are there some benefits for chocolate?
Absolutely. Actually, I'm a big fan of chocolate. I think eaten occasionally and moderately, chocolate can be quite healthy. I recommend good quality dark chocolate. Good quality because lower quality chocolate has worse fats in it, and milk chocolate has milk fat in it. Also, chocolate has a lot of antioxidants, similar to the pigments in red wine and red fruits that are protective.
All right, we'll be going back to talk with Dr. Weil in just a moment, but now I want to throw it over to Jenny Press. Jenny, how are we going with the phone calls? Seem to be really going very well here, but I know you've got some thank yous that you want to tell the people about.
I certainly have, Bill. Thank you so much, and I'm thrilled to hear that piece about the chocolate. That is wonderful. I'm going to go right out and get a piece, and I bet you are too. But don't go anywhere until you have been able to call us to get a copy for yourself of the videotape of Eating Well for Optimum Health that you have just finished watching. Put this on your video library shelf, only $90. You get all of this program, and as Bill told you, 20 minutes extra, so that's a surprise in store for you. Now you can also get the book when you call in with your pledge of $120 for a year, and then the grand value at $175 a year, the book and the videotape. You can only get it right here at this public television station. This is a superb gift, the book and the videotape. You will be able to research this, look up the chapters you want to revisit, and stay healthy for the rest of your life. And in the process, keep this public television station healthy also. You know that you get your health and your education and your information from here, so please call in and make a pledge. And over to you, Bill.
We've been talking to Dr. Weil about some of the wonderful information that's contained in the book. And Dr. Weil, I'm sure, would like to actually make a pitch, if you will, to all of the public broadcasting supporters around the country, because you're a supporter yourself.
I am, and I think it is good for your own mental health and well-being to watch public television and support it, and it's certainly good for the health of this station if viewers out there will give their support.
Make that call right now to this public broadcasting station. Another viewer question had to do with sun sensitivity. Are there certain foods or herbal supplements that would make you more susceptible to sun?
Actually, celery produces compounds that can increase sensitivity to ultraviolet light. And of the herbs, St. John's wort, popularly used as an antidepressant, can increase photosensitivity.
We had another question for Dr. Weil about arthritis pain. This, of course, is millions of people in this country suffer from arthritis. Are there certain foods that can benefit?
Absolutely. And in fact, in our integrative medicine clinic at the University of Arizona, we commonly put people on an anti-inflammatory diet that emphasizes the right fats I was talking about in the program. Monounsaturated fats, avoidance of polyunsaturated vegetable oils, and especially greatly upping the intake of omega-3 fatty acids, which are anti-inflammatory.
What would you say, Dr. Weil, is the message that you hope that the viewer will take away from not only reading the book, but watching the program?
First, to be really an informed consumer. Second, to realize that the main danger out there is highly refined and processed food. That the more we can eat foods that are whole and unprocessed, the healthier we'll be. And certainly the main message that the way you eat is one significant influence on your health.
All right, and we have another message for you. Jenny has a message to tell all the viewers and supporters of public broadcasting how they can take advantage of some very special thank yous. Jenny?
Thank you, Bill. And that's right, we certainly do have some wonderful offers for you. You know that you are the lifeblood of public television, don't you? And that if you haven't called in to pledge your support, well, now is the perfect time to do so. And when you call in and pledge $90 annually, that is enables you to receive Eating Well for Optimum Health, a wonderful video follows all the lines of this program tonight. And of course, because it is the program with 20 extra minutes, and then at $120, you receive the book, Eating Well for Optimum Health, of course, written by Dr. Andrew Weil. And then for extra value at $175, you will receive the book and the videotape you just cannot miss. However, they will only come to you when you call your public television station, pledge your membership support, say, I am interested in maintaining quality program like Dr. Andrew Weil's Eating Your Way to Optimum Health on public broadcasting. You know that you're educated here. You know you receive the information that is good for your life. You have had the opportunity to hear Dr. Weil answer your questions this evening. And so now it's up to you. Please call in, pledge your membership support.
And Dr. Weil is still with us in studio. Dr. Weil, someone called about oats and oatmeal. There's been a lot of talk about that it may actually help prevent cancer. Any truth to that?
Actually, the main research that we have is that the fiber in oats and oat bran causes a moderate reduction in cholesterol. I don't know that oats have any significant anti-cancer activity, but including whole grains in the diet, such as oats, is certainly generally helpful.
And you get into the whole carbohydrate and
Absolutely.
cholesterol thing in
Absolutely.
the book,
Yeah.
Eating Well for Optimum Health, which can be yours, and we encourage you to make that call right now. The book is available at $120, and the tape of the program that you enjoyed tonight, that's available for $90. The combo, that's probably the best way to go. If you want the book and the tape, that's available for you at $175. We've had a lot of questions from viewers tonight. Is there one particular question as you tour the world, do you get more than any other question?
You know, I certainly get a lot of questions today about soy. I think soy is in the news. People have heard about that a lot. I'm asked frequently about wine. That's discussed extensively in the book. I think there are real health benefits to red wine especially, but they're actually in the red pigments in the wine, not the alcohol itself, and you can get those in red grape juice and in red and purple fruits.
All right, we're going to go now over to Jenny and find out how we're doing. It sounds like, Jenny, we've had a wonderful response to the program. Tell us about those thank you gifts.
I certainly will. It'll be my pleasure, Bill. And yes, we've had a tremendous response to the program, as we hoped and expected, and you can still call. Our phones are still open. $90, you'll receive the VHS, the video of this program that you have just so much enjoyed. At $120, you'll receive the book. And of course, the combo, as Bill has been calling it, you receive the book and the VHS of this excellent, excellent program and information. It's yours only when you call the public broadcasting station that you support. You make that call right now. The phones are open. And then you will be able to sit back knowing that you have supported public television. Back to you again, Bill.
All right, we want to thank Dr. Andrew Weil for being with us in studio. Dr. Weil, it's the viewers of public broadcasting that make programs like your special possible. We need them to go to the phone in this remaining minute. If they've been putting it off, let's have them go and make that call right now.
I think that's a great idea. I would love to see that support, and I think that's the way to get more programs of this sort.
All right, Dr. Weil, again, thank you very much for being with us, and I want to tell our public broadcasting viewers, thank you very much for calling. We still have operators standing by, ready to take those calls. They're here, waiting for the call, and again, thank you.
Fulfilling your need to know. CPTV science programs are brought to you by the following, by their investment in CPTV.
Big Y World-Class Markets has been American-owned and family-operated since 1936. Big Y is dedicated to the community and serves New England families with 45 locations.